Yud test. So we're Masechta Sukkah Yud test. Ki pliga libe de Rav. This is the issue of if you have like beams without a wall, you have a roof. Do we drop an imaginary wall called pisikra yored v'soisim? There's a close off like an Alexandra, which is like a patio. The walls of a patio, it's considered that it's piece yored v'soisim because the purpose of the patio is for inside the patio. It's not for outside; it's for inside. But regarding a sukkah, Rashi says pisikra zel Hashem achzadar nases lios lo mechitz lechalal zav. When you build a patio and you have like beams like that, you're creating a wall for that little area. But not to be a wall out for the outside. But a regular full-fledged mechitza, but a wall that's supposed to be a wall for both inside and outside, we would not use this heter piyored v'soisim. So, Tanan, let's say you have a courtyard that surrounds an achsandra. Now we say we can't utilize that for like a rishus. Amai, name of pisikra. You ever said, why don't we use pisikra? So Tirgama, that's so Abaya who says pisikra, it's good. So Tirgama Rav Alibid Abaya Kishihishvas Kiruav. It has to do with how you structured the rim of the ceiling. In that case, it's all one. It's not nicker that you see a pisikra. You can't see from where you're sitting that there's an extension of the rooftop that you can drop down. If you can't see it, then you wouldn't be able to use the heter. Now, the surah Masdila Shmaitz by Lishna. In Surah, which was one of the towns in Bavel, that's the language they use. But the Pumbedisa Masni differently, right? Surah and Pumbedisa were the two large Talmudic centers. By the way, you should know, Surah and Pumbedisa existed until the year 1000. It means here in the Gemara, we're talking about the year 400. So these Talmudic academies existed for another 600 years. And the Gaonim that we know, Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Sadia Gaon, they lived in the year 800, 900, etc. They were also the Gaonims, respectively, of Surah and Pumbedisa. So it's just an important, these it's like Ponevezh or Lakewood, or whatever great city housed the Talmudic Academy, Volozhin, in unfortunately, they've had only very short periods. Surah and Pumbedisa existed for almost 1,000 years as Talmudic Academy. Pumbedisa masti sichach agabi achsandra shein laptzimim. You put schach, you only have 4 posts. You put schach on top of that. Divrei hakol psula. We don't say pi yored v'soisim. Everybody holds it. You don't have walls, and it's possible. That's if there's no ptzimim. That's if there's no columns. Yesh lo ptzimim. So then we have the machlekes Abai and Rava. Abai omer ksheira, Rava omer psula. Abai omer ksheira mean in lavud. I guess if you have, we're talking about you have beams, but the beams are within 3 tfachim of each other. Then you can say, you use lavud and you close it, and even though you don't have a real wall, you have a halachic wall regarding lavud. And Rava says no. However, the Hilchos says kalishna kama, it's like the first lashon, like we learned in Surah, not in Pumbedisa. Ravashi Ashken Rav Kana the Kumasacha Gabi Achsan Devshin Laptzimim. Ravashi saw that Rav Kana made a sukkah on one of these achsandras without the beams. How can you say, How can you use the sukkah? Rava said that it's possible. That's it's possible if you cannot see the end of the roof, so you can't draw it down. But we said if you can see it, if it's nearer, you can drop it down. If you can see it from the outside, for example, that's a mavui, where we said if you have an alleyway, three-sided alleyway that opens up in Shusarabim, if you can see the lechi from the outside, it's a good lechi. And lechi has the same status of tzimim. And we paskin that way regarding the lechi, and regarding if you can see the tzimim coming down. Over the halacha regarding sukkah, I'm going to read Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Shin Samech Aleph Achzan Rishein LaArba Mechitza Shlemos Lemeres Besodeh. You have one of these huts out in the field that don't have walls. It just has beams, and it has a roof. Yesh lakira gabo. Im yesh bo shtei mechitzos gemuro zubit tzadzu. If they have a right angle, two walls that are at right angle, then you use pisik or yored v'soisim, and you can carry there. But otherwise, you can't. If you have walls on the opposite side of each other, and you have a through mavui, that's a mavui mafulish. You would not be able to carry there if you built that kind of structure in a Carmelis or Rishus Harabi. Same thing regarding sukkah. Tana. Pesal ayotzim in a sukkah. You have schach that hangs over the back of over the walls, over the middle wall. Let's say you only have a three-sided sukkah, and in the back, there's some schach that overhangs that back wall. That's called the achoire sukkah. So it's treated like a sukkah. My pesel, what does that mean? We're talking about reeds that are hanging off on the back. So the question is, there's no walls there, right? If you have your sukkah and you have a lot of extra schach hanging off the back of your sukkah, but there's no walls back there, how could you say it's a kosher sukkah? And the Gemara says, you need at least three walls. So the Gemara says, b'di'ika, we're talking about you're using sort of your extra schach that hangs up, and behind there are three walls. So that hanging off schach is kosher, and you have a kosher sukkah. But l'chura, that back sukkah, you didn't do l'shem sukkah. What about taseh v'lo min ha'asui? So what is b'dika? You had kavana, and you made that back area also a sukkah. But a sukkah has to have shade, more shade than sun. B'dika. So we've checked off all the boxes, and therefore it's a kosher sukkah. So ihachi ma'ila memra. So then what's the chiddush? Oh, the same oil gavoy davidi. When you first laid down your initial schach, the schach that's hanging off on the outside is for the outside. It was not l'shem sukkah on the inside. It was for an outside thing. Maybe levrolo avidi malo. So I would think maybe it wouldn't work. Kamash malon that it works. Rav Yosef Amri Tarvayu. This is not in the back of the sukkah, it's in front of the sukkah. In the fourth, right, we have a three-walled sukkah. Right now we talked about the schach hanging off the back wall. But what about if you have extra schach hanging off the front where there's no wall at all? So you've laid down all your schach and there's some extra schach hanging out in front of the sukkah. One of the walls of the sukkah you extended, and now that extra schach that's hanging on the outside also has a wall that extends. To say less sukkah, you don't really have a hechsher sukkah, you have one wall. Kamash malon, that this is how Rav Yosef learned the Mishnah. That's the chiddush of our Mishnah, that it would serve as a sukkah as well.
According to the picture on 22, there's no way that the schach will stay up there without having something to hold on to on the other side. Even though there's no wall, there's nothing. If you put a schach on one side, let's say bamboo is going across, there's nothing to hold up the.
Yeah, it will. I'm looking at the same picture, I think, because you might have where the other wall ends, right? You have one where the one wall is short and the other where the wall is long. So where the wall is short, you could put a cross beam on top, and then if you have big palm branches lining on it, that piece of schach will have something to be supported on. If it's very firm, right? If the palm is a type of a palm that's not going to hang down, you could see, or bamboo is a straight, hard thing that could be sticking off that. I think it could work there. Rav Yochanan says the Chiddush, this din of our Mishnah has to do with, in that case, there's more shade than sun in the majority of the sukkah, but miyuta chamsa merubah mitzvota. In some of the sukkah, minority part of the sukkah, there's more sun. Maybe a sukkah can become possible even for the small part in the sukkah where there's more sun than shade. Kamash Malon, that no, such a sukkah remains kosher. All of these halachas, the Shulchan Aruch paskins lekula. We treat each one of these things as a sukkah. And even if it's got a minority part of the sukkah has more sun than shade, the whole sukkah is still kosher. Some are machmir, like Rav Yochanan, that the Ramah is machmir, that if you have a sukkah that even part of it has more sun than shade, that it might pass it. Back to the Gemara. What does it mean when the Mishnah said yotze? Yotze after sukkah. That meant if part of the sukkah had more sun than shade, it's not a kosher sukkah anymore. So Rav Shaya Omar, a different pshat in the Mishnah, that you have a small sukkah, 7 by 7 tvachim, and you have non-kosher schach, like metal, less than 3. And that doesn't pass, and you can sleep underneath it. It's a kula. And my yotze mitorah sukkah. You might think it might be yotze mitorah sukkah, and it's not. It shouldn't be like it shouldn't be worse than empty space. If you have a sukkah of 7 by 7 tvachim, and you have airspace less than 3 tvachim, nobody passes such a sukkah, so certainly it should be okay. The difference is by tzchach pasol, it's mitztarev to a sukkah, and you can sleep underneath it. It's bottled the gamre to the remaining sukkah. It becomes part of it. You can sleep even under that tzchach. But empty space, it might be mitztarev to make you a kosher sukkah regarding how much area there is, zayin by zayin, but there's no schach there, but you can't sleep, and you shouldn't have, but you wouldn't be able to sleep under that area. That's a nafkamina between whether you have space or schach posel. Comes out that by avir, if let's say your sukkah is only zayin by zayin, and you have empty space, we said 2 tvachim, we said less than 3, the sukkah remains kosher, but you can't sleep underneath it. So now, if you didn't use the 2 of the airspace, you wouldn't have zayin by zayin. It would be zayin by 5. It would be a possible take a sukkah. We say no. It's mitzaref l'shir sukkah. So when you measure it zayin by zayin, but you can't sleep under it. It itself is not kosher. So that's the Gemara's questioning. Is there such a thing? Make immediate itztarfui mitzaref. You're using it for itztarfus la halacha, but v'hu atzmei kosher. Amar Yitzchak ben El Yoshev in. Yes. Tit hanorak yochia. You have very thin mud at the bottom of a mikveh. Rashi says it's so thin that you could pour it from kli to kli. And you're measuring for a kosher mikveh, you need 40 saw. Let's say some of the at the bottom is a little muddy. Can you measure that volume as part of the volume of 40 saw? So it's mitzaref l'arbaim saw, but not toivel below also lo tefillah. You have to make sure that your toivel in the water above. You have to jump right from the ground and make sure you're floating in the water that's not in that mud. Like if your feet were on the bottom in the mud area, tefillah would not be oily for you. So it's another example where you're using it to be mitzaref to the whole shear, but it itself is not kosher to do the tefillah. Similarly, the empty space, we said if you don't have schach there, you can use it for the measurement of the sukkah dimensions as a whole, 7 by 7, but you can't sleep underneath it. New Mishnah. Ha'oises ukosu kamin tzrif. Now, a tzrif, Rashi says, was like a birdhouse, where you have slanted roofs. The roofs, it's like a triangle. How about if you leaned? You just took a wall. You leaned a board against a wall. So Rabbi Eliezer points to Mipnei Shein Lagad doesn't have a roof. The Chachamim machshirin. By the way, I was once by the Klosenberger Rebbe in Netanya. I went with David Zephyr. It was Chol Hamoed Sukkos. We sat Oy Benun by the Simchas Beis Shoeva, and then afterwards, he invited us in to his apartment. We may have spent a half hour with him, B'Yechidus. And remember, his father, the current Klosenberger Rebbe, was the Klosenberger Rebbe who survived Auschwitz. And there are a lot of stories about him in the concentration camps that he was able to bake matzahs. And we asked about, so he mentioned that they made some kind of sukkah. They found, I don't know whether it was a palm branch in Poland, I'm sure there was no palm branch, but they found some branch of a tree and they leaned it against one of the cabins in this fashion, so that he had a wall, the schach and the walls were the same, and he went underneath it for a minute. So he was yotzes din sukkah for a minute. Doesn't mean that they were yotzes these dinim in the way we are yotzes them, but as long as you yotzes for 1 minute, the din sukkah. I remember him telling us that story. I think it's based on this Mishnah. However, if you lifted the wall away at least a tefach, and it has a roof of at least 1 tefach, which just because a tent is angled, it's like an oil. So why shouldn't it be a good sukkah? A kilas chasanim was the wedding bed, which had a pole and then sheets draped over the pole. So it was like a triangle. The bed was like a triangle. And he was sleeping in a kilas chasanim in the sukkah. Like Kaman Rabbi Eliezer? What, you hold like Rabbi Eliezer? Shavkas Rabban Rabbi Eliezer? Why are you sleeping in the kila? Are you holding like Rabbi Eliezer, not the Chachamim? Are you holding that this kind of angled oil is not an oil. Therefore, by sleeping underneath it, it doesn't puzzle the fact that you're in a sukkah. So you're puzzled like now Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkinis was put into cherem. Rabbi Eliezer is shamuti. We don't paskin like Rabbi Eliezer. We usually paskin like the Chachamim. So how can you leave the Chachamim and paskin like Rabbi Eliezer? Amarle, yeah, because Baraisa Platoni, because I found another Baraisa. Rabbi Eliezer machshav a Chachamim poison. It was a Chachamim that paskin that kind of triangle oil, that it's not really an oil, and therefore if I sleep underneath it, it's as if I'm sleeping in the sukkah. So they asked him, I don't understand. Shatkis Masnisin, our Mishnah is a Mishnah. The Adis Kibraisa? What is the Mishnah were codified by Yehuda Nossi? The Baraisas were leftover pieces of Tanaitic literature that two Amoyroim in the generation after Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shaya, they gathered in the Toseftas and the Baraisas. They called them a Baraisa. But we have Masorah that our Mishnayos codified by Yehuda Nossi were more authoritative. So the Gemara is asking, how could you paskin like the Baraisa, not like the Mishnah? You know why? Because we identified that this Mishnah is a Mishnah that was taught by Rav Nossi, not the standard Mishnah. And therefore, it was not authoritative. And the Baraisa, the Rabbonim of Rav Nossi's generation, argued with him. Where do we see this? So if you made it like a triangle, or you leaned against the Rav Nosson Oimer, Rav Eliezer Poisel, but Neshem Makag, but this was so this price is not authoritative because it's Rav Nosson only, not Rav Yehuda Nossi, and therefore you can rely on the price rather than our Mishnah. Mishnah. Machzeles konim gedolim. You have a mat of reeds, but a large one. So it depends. Asal l'shchiva. Normally, these kind of reeds were made for a bed. So, if it was made to lie down on, then it's like a kli. Mekabel is tuma. You can't use for stuff. Now, if this mat was made l'sichoch to use as a roof, then it's not a kli. It's not mekabel tuma. Whether the mat of reeds was big or small, we look at the intent. If it's made to sit on, if it was made l'sichuch, if it's made for schach, it's not mekabel tumah. It can be for schach. High gufa kasha. So the Gemara points out the Mishnah is internally contradictory. Said if you made it for sitting purposes or lying purposes, it's a kli. You can't use it for schach, and it's time of the reason for it is dasol l'shchiva. Hastama. Let's say you were silent when you made it. You didn't say what you're making it for. So it sounds from our Mishnah that it's dafka if you were miskabin for shchiva, but if you had no kavan at all, schach would win. But immediately the Mishnah goes on to say, l'sichuch, if you had kavanah l'schach, l'sachin bo ve'en mekabel tum. Chaim dasol l'sichuch, hastama l'shchiva. So if you had no intent, it's just the opposite. Your kavanah would be for lying. So which one is it? It seems that the Mishnah is internally contradictory. Versus haloi kasha, kan big doila, kan big tana. Depends if you have a large mat, or it means initially we're talking about a large mat. That there, if you made it for lying purposes, that's mekabel tumah. But later on, when the brisa continued or the Mishnah continued, we're talking about a small mat. That if you made it for schach, then you can use it, but still would be for shchita. So it's dealing with two cases, gdoila and ketana. Bishlam and Rabbanon like kasha. According to the Rabbanon, that's no problem. But Rabbi Eliezer, who later on made a distinction, it's a huge problem, right? Right? That's because you made it, your intent was to lie. The name is Seifa. Because again, the kavanah was for schach. So based on that, you'd have a major problem with Rabbi Eliezer. It's internal contradictory for him. So let's go back and be mataretz. For a large mat of reeds, there's no machlokas. Everybody holds that if you did not say anything, it's just a stam kavana. Stam kavana is l'schach. The machlokas is when you make a small mat of reeds. Ki pliga b'ktan. Tana kamasar is stam ktan l'shchiva. Usually small mats, you don't make for schach, you make for lying down, like as a mattress. So stam would be l'shchiva. But Rabbi Yezer Sover, stam ktan nami l'sichuch. He says no, even a small mat could be made for schach. Okay. So let me just show you the beauty